Hazel was always the yes woman, babysitting, listening to complaints, doing favors. But one day, after agreeing to yet another request, she realized she was putting everyone else first and losing herself in the process. That's when Hazel decided no more. She started setting boundaries and reclaiming her time, and everything changed. That was the day Hazel made a decision: no more being a doormat. It was time to set boundaries, reclaim her time, and, most importantly, respect herself. And you know what? It changed everything. Here's how you can do the same. 1. No is a complete sentence. Say it and leave it. There for years, Hazel felt like she had to soften the blow whenever she turned someone down. If she said no, she had to follow it with a long-winded excuse, like she was on trial and needed to prove she was innocent. I would love to help, but I have a doctor's appointment. And then I have to take care of the dog. And you know how my back gets after standing too long. Sound familiar? One day, Hazel had an aha moment. She realized she didn't have to explain herself like a kid caught sneaking cookies before dinner. She could just say, no. That's it. No extra fluff. No over-explaining. And guess what? The world didn't end. The people who respected her boundaries didn't question it. And the ones who got upset? Well, that was their problem, not hers. 2. Your time is precious. Stop giving it away like free samples at Costco. Hazel used to act like a 24-hour hotline, always on call for everyone else's needs. Need a last-minute babysitter? Call Hazel. Need someone to run an errand? Hazel's available. Need a listening ear for the 100th time about your neighbor's drama? Yep, Hazel's got time. Then she had a realization. Her time was just as valuable as anyone else's. So she stopped treating herself like a second-class citizen in her own life. Now she schedules her own priorities first. A quiet morning with coffee and a book? Non-negotiable. A relaxing walk? Absolutely. And when someone tries to hijack her time, she simply says, sorry, I'm not available. No details, no justifications, just the truth. 3. Cut off the energy vampires. They'll find someone else to drain. You know the ones, the people who only call when they need something but disappear when you need support. Hazel had a few of those in her life. At first, she kept answering their calls, thinking, maybe this time will be different. Spoiler alert, it never was. Then she started recognizing the pattern. These people weren't interested in a friendship. They wanted a one-sided emotional dumping ground. So she set new rules. She answered calls on her terms, not theirs. She cut conversations short when they turned into energy-draining rants. And guess what? The people who only wanted to take? They mysteriously disappeared. And Hazel? She felt lighter, freer, and way less exhausted. 4. Family boundaries? Yep, even with your kids. Hazel loves her family, but let's be honest. Sometimes they treat her like an unpaid assistant. Last-minute babysitting, constantly being asked to help with errands, never getting a thank you. At first, she thought, well, that's just what moms do. But then she realized she had raised her kids to be independent, capable adults. So why was she still acting like she owed them all her time? Now she sets clear limits. She lets them know when she's available and when she's not. No more dropping everything at a moment's notice. And guess what? They adjusted. In fact, they actually started appreciating the time they did spend together even more. 5. Stop explaining yourself to people who just want to change your mind. Hazel used to think that if she explained her reasons just right, people would understand and back off. But she quickly learned that some people weren't looking for an explanation. They were looking for a way to talk her into changing her mind. So she stopped playing that game. Now, when someone asks for a favor and she doesn't want to do it, she simply says, "That doesn't work for me." That's it. No loopholes, no debate, no extra words to give them an opening. And just like that, the pushy people in her life had nothing left to argue with. 6. Make self-care a non-negotiable priority. Because you deserve it. Hazel used to put herself last. If someone needed something, she dropped everything. If she had a quiet evening planned, she let people interrupt it. But one day she realized self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary. So she started treating her alone time like an important meeting. Whether it was a morning walk, a bubble bath, or just sitting in silence with a good cup of tea, she committed to herself. And guess what? She became happier, healthier, and actually had more energy for the people she truly cared about. 7. Guilt trips? Return them to sender. "Oh, but you're the only one who can help. I'd be so disappointed if you didn't come." Hazel used to fall for these guilt trips every time. But then she realized, if someone is trying to make her feel bad for setting a boundary, that's their issue, not hers. Now she responds with empathy, but firmness. "I understand that you're disappointed, but I can't do that." No backtracking, no second guessing. And guess what? People always get over it. 8. Your social calendar, your rules. Hazel used to say yes to every invitation that came her way, even when she didn't feel like going. She worried about hurting people's feelings or missing out on something important. She'd find herself at events she wasn't excited about, feeling drained and wishing she had spent the time doing something else. It became a cycle of saying yes out of obligation rather than desire. But one day, Hazel had an aha moment. If she wasn't excited about attending, why was she forcing herself? So she made a change. Instead of automatically saying yes, she started asking herself if she was truly looking forward to the event. If not, she politely declined. Now, when someone invites her somewhere and it's not something she feels excited about, she simply says, "I'm taking it easy this week." No more guilt, no more stress, and no more resentment. By honoring her own needs and saying no to events she wasn't genuinely excited for, Hazel discovered she actually enjoyed the social events she did go to even more. She could be fully present and energized, rather than wishing she was somewhere else. Setting boundaries like this gave her more control over her social life, and the best part? She learned that it's okay to prioritize her peace. 9. If someone talks over you, speak louder. Hazel used to let people interrupt her in conversations, thinking it wasn't worth the trouble to make a fuss. She would hold back, quietly allowing others to dominate the discussion, even when she had something important to say. Over time, she realized that by doing this, she was letting her voice get lost in the shuffle, and her opinions and ideas deserved to be heard. One day, Hazel decided enough was enough. If someone tried to interrupt her, she no longer stayed quiet or let them steamroll her thoughts. Instead, she calmly but firmly would say, "I wasn't finished," and then continue speaking, ensuring her voice was heard. It felt empowering to reclaim her space in a conversation. To her surprise, people started listening more attentively. They respected the boundaries she set and even started to value her input more. Hazel's confidence grew, and she realized that by standing her ground and asserting herself, she was not only showing others how to treat her, but also reinforcing her own sense of worth. No more fading into the background. Hazel's voice was finally front and center, and it felt amazing. 10th stop. Apologizing for simply existing. Hazel spent years saying sorry for things that weren't even her fault. Whether it was for not attending an event, not responding quickly enough, or even just needing a little time to herself, she felt like she had to apologize for everything. It had become a habit, one that made her feel like she was constantly shrinking herself to make others feel comfortable. But one day, Hazel had a realization. She had absolutely nothing to apologize for. She didn't owe anyone an apology for setting boundaries or taking care of her own needs. From that moment, Hazel decided to stop over-apologizing. Instead of saying, "Sorry, I can't make it," she started saying, "I won't be able to make it, but I hope you have a great time." Instead of apologizing for taking a little longer to respond to messages, she would say, "Thanks for your patience." It was a small change in her words, but it made a huge difference in how she felt. No more shrinking herself. No more unnecessary apologies. Now, Hazel speaks with confidence, knowing that she doesn't need to apologize for being herself or taking up space. And the best part? She finally feels free. 11th stop. Apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Hazel used to apologize for everything. Whether it was calling someone too late or turning down an invitation, she would constantly say, "Sorry for bothering you," or "Sorry, I can't make it." It was second nature, almost like a reflex. But one day, Hazel caught herself apologizing for absolutely no reason. She thought, "Why am I apologizing just for existing?" That was the moment everything changed. She realized that apologizing wasn't helping her. It was making her feel small, as if she had to apologize for taking up space. So she made a simple yet powerful change in how she communicated. Instead of saying, "Sorry, I can't make it," she began saying, "I won't be able to make it, but I hope you have a great time." Instead of apologizing for taking a little longer to respond to a text, she'd say, "Thanks for your patience." It wasn't about being rude. It was about standing in her own power and speaking with confidence. No more unnecessary apologies. Small tweak, big difference. Now, Hazel speaks with assurance, knowing she has nothing to apologize for. 12. Accept that not everyone will like you, and that's their problem, not yours. For years, Hazel tried to make everyone happy. She said yes to everything, sacrificed her own needs, and hoped people would appreciate it. But no matter what, someone always found something to complain about. Then one day, Hazel realized, no matter how hard she tried, some people wouldn't be happy. She could be the sweetest peach, but some just didn't like peaches, and that's okay. So Hazel stopped people-pleasing. She focused on relationships that truly mattered and stopped explaining herself. Now she lives by one simple rule: I'm not for everyone, and that's just fine. She finally found peace in being herself. 13. Trust your gut. It's always right. Hazel had spent many years ignoring her gut feelings. Whether it was a pushy person, a questionable situation, or a deal that didn't quite feel right, she'd push it aside, convincing herself that she was being overly cautious. She told herself things like, "Maybe I'm just overreacting," or "I'll give it another chance." But with time, she realized something that made all the difference. Her gut had never steered her wrong. Looking back, Hazel could recall several occasions where she'd ignored that inner voice, only to regret it later. There was that person who seemed too charming, but turned out to be unreliable, or the deal that, in hindsight, felt shady and ultimately fell apart. Now, Hazel listens to her gut. She doesn't question it anymore. If something feels wrong, she takes a step back. If a person seems a little off, she doesn't try to convince herself otherwise. She trusts the feeling and walks away. It's been a game changer for her life, saving her from bad situations and saving her peace of mind. Her lesson? Your gut is a built-in warning system. It's there to protect you, and it's rarely wrong. Trust it, and you'll save yourself a lot of stress. 14. Keep toxic people at a distance, even if that means letting them go. Hazel used to tolerate toxic people out of politeness. There was the friend who only called to gossip, the family member who always had something negative to say, and the acquaintance who perfected the art of backhanded compliments. At first, she thought it was just part of life. She was being kind, right? But over time, she realized how draining it all was. She started asking herself, why am I making room for people who make me feel bad? And that's when everything changed. She began setting clear boundaries. She stopped answering calls from the gossiping friend, and she let the negative comments from her family member slide off her back. If someone was bringing her down, she simply walked away. It wasn't easy at first, but as Hazel distanced herself from negativity, she found peace. The more she let go of toxic people, the more room she had for joy and meaningful connections. And in the end, she realized that peace was far better than politeness. 15. Boundaries aren't just for others. They're for you, too. At the end of the day, Hazel had a revelation, one that changed everything. Boundaries weren't just about keeping pushy people in check. They weren't about controlling others or proving a point. They were about something much deeper, honoring herself. For too long, she had put everyone else's needs before her own. She thought being a good person meant saying yes, being available, and making sure everyone else was comfortable, even if it made her uncomfortable. She thought it was her job to keep the peace, to make sure no one was upset, to always be the one who smoothed things over. But here's what she finally understood. Every time she said yes to something she didn't want to do, she was saying no to herself, no to her own needs, no to her peace of mind, no to the life she actually wanted to live. And when she realized that, everything shifted. Hazel started doing something radical. She put herself first. She protected her time like it was a treasure because it was. She trusted her gut instead of second-guessing herself. She said no without guilt, without explanation, without backtracking. She walked away from energy vampires, guilt trippers, and people who only took without ever giving back. And for the first time in her life, she felt free. Not polite free, not maybe they won't be mad at me free. Truly, deeply, beautifully free. And that, right there, is the power of boundaries. Hazel's life changed when she finally took control. And yours can too. Boundaries aren't about being rude or selfish. They're about making sure your life feels good to you. So which boundary will you start setting today? Drop a comment below and let's start reclaiming our peace, one no at a time.